Hi everyone, I'm Dale Smith, aka Journo Dale, and we're here to talk about Canadian politics. We've been hearing a lot the last couple weeks about Bill 96 in Quebec, and what this is about is steps to kind of further entrench French language rights in the province. But they're trying to do so using some particularly novel mechanisms which are almost certainly unconstitutional, particularly the notion that they can unilaterally amend part of the federal constitution under the notion that they're using the amending formula for provincial constitutions. And that is a little bit confusing, and deliberately so. And so I figured I'd take a few minutes to walk through some of what this actually means. So part of it is what are provincial constitutions? And that is one of those kinds of things where it's a series of different documents that kind of form the constitutions of how a province works. And that's a lot of it is, the kind of basic structure of partially this is responsible government, this is how our systems kind of operate, but it's also a certain amount of these are the borders of the province. These are the electoral districts. This is the electoral system we're using in this province, and so on. And it's not all in a single document for the most part. Part of it is within the federal constitution, what was formerly the British North America Act 1867, now known as the Constitution Act 1867, after it was patriated to Canada in 1982. So part of it's in there, particularly for Ontario and Quebec, because prior to Confederation, they were a single province, the United Province of Canada. And they needed, as part of Confederation, to have the delineation of the provinces into separate entities, and that was done through the BNA Act at the time, whereas Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, basically their colonial charter documents were basically considered their provincial constitutions and kind of wrapped in that way. It's different with other provinces as well. With British Columbia, it was part of the act of bringing them into Confederation. With Alberta and Saskatchewan, it was the creation of the two provinces out of what was the Northwest Territories at the time. And those were federal statutes that did that. So there's the Alberta Act 1905, Saskatchewan Act 1905, for example. Those form the bases of their provincial constitutions. But more than anything else, it's this collection of different documents. It's not a single, this is the Constitution of the province, this is the Constitution of Canada. It's a mix of different things, and that's why it can be a little bit confusing. What Quebec or the current Quebec government, I should say, is proposing to do is, as part of these changes, insert a clause into the national constitution that says, under the heading of provincial constitutions, but not in a really logical place within that heading, is they're saying Quebec is a nation, and also that French is the only language of that nation, which is problematic because there are specific amending formulas within the Constitution around official languages. And those specific formulas require the federal parliament to also pass the amendment as opposed to just the province doing it. And that's kind of where we find ourselves, is because this notion of trying to insist that that's part of the provincial constitution and not the federal one is slightly problematic, both because of the official languages component, but also because it's not really the provincial constitution that they're amending in that regard. And we have to remember that there is this bilateral amending formula for provinces that is invoked for most anything. Like, for example, Newfoundland and Labrador When they changed the name of the province from just Newfoundland to Newfoundland and Labrador, that was a bilateral amendment with the provincial legislature and the federal parliament. That isn't something that the province could just do on their own, even though it is something that is specifically just related to the province and within their own powers. Now, if, for example, Quebec wanted to change their electoral system, which they have said they were going to do and then seems to be backing away from, that can be done within the province unilaterally with a provincial amendment to the provincial constitution, because that is all that entails. But it does not affect the national constitution or the BNA Act / Constitution Act 1867. Whereas what they're proposing to add to it does. And that's where some of this confusion has come in, and why I think it's important that we need to disentangle some of this, because they're trying deliberately to insist that, no, this is just a provincial constitution amendment, and it's not really under what they're trying to do. It's also because one of the things within their bill is also to basically undermine the rights of English Quebecers, particularly when it comes to being able to access the courts. And there is a constitutional provision that anyone in Canada can access the courts in either English or French, no matter what part of the country you're in. And that's why we have why we make sure that there are judges capable of speaking French in the superior courts all around the country, as well as courts of appeal. And that is one of the things why there's some problems with this particular bill, that, again, they can't just amend unilaterally. And that's one of the things why we need to have a broader discussion about it, but we haven't really been having that discussion. And this goes kind of to where the federal parties are playing at. The Liberals are trying to be very cute about this, and Justin Trudeau has basically said his legal advice is that they can go ahead and do it, providing that it doesn't impact on other rights. But that's kind of the key little detail there, because it does impact on other rights, particularly the provisions around access to courts and so on. So he's trying to be cute, and he's trying to play both sides, and it's kind of weaselly in the process. And I think that's what we need to be aware of. The NDP, for example, say that sure, they can do it because it's just a symbolic change, but it's not really a symbolic change, and the Constitution is really not a place for symbolism, because these are the rules by which the country is governed. And so that position is particularly problematic as well. And then the Conservatives, for their part, are trying to say that, basically just go along with it, because their political calculus is to basically try and outblock the bloc and become Francois Legault's best friend, because they think that's going to get them votes in the next election, which everyone is really trying to suck up to Legault, because he is still incredibly popular in the province despite everything that's happened during the pandemic, almost disconcertingly so in terms of where his numbers are at. So federal leaders are really trying to get on his good side in the hopes that he will help them in the next election, whenever that may be. So that's kind of led to some of where these dynamics are right now, and they can be particularly problematic. And when the Bloc moved a motion in the previous week, trying to essentially make it sound like the federal government, or the federal parliament, or House of Commons in any case, was fine with Bill 96 and Quebec being able to pass it unilaterally, all of the parties were ready to sign on, and it was Jody Wilson-Raybould as an independent who said no. And very rightly she said no, and she very well should have said no, because there are complex issues in this that we shouldn't just be glossing over. You should not gloss over an amendment to the Constitution, particularly when a province is proposing to do it unilaterally. And one of the other problems here is that if Quebec does this unilaterally and nobody raises a fuss, then other provinces are going to start thinking of ways that they can unilaterally amend the Constitution for their own rights of some variety, give or take whatever excuse they're going to use it as. And then start trying to do that for their own political gain or to exert some kind of leverage to exert concessions from the federal government for something or something like that. So it's very much a slippery slope, and it's very much something that we should be very cautious about. But there doesn't seem to be an adequate level of said caution right now. So I think this is something we really should be keeping an eye on and pushing back a little bit, and not just letting Quebec say we can do this unilaterally when it's in the clear letter of the Constitution that they can't, and not try and be cute about what they can and can't do, like Trudeau seems to be wanting to do. So this is something we really should keep an eye on, and not let anyone kind of get away with pulling the fast one here. And that's everything for this week. Join us again next week for some more Canadian politics. I'm Dale Smith. That's at journo_Dale on Twitter. And don't forget to like the video, share, subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Thanks, everyone.